All right. Hi, we're group number 5, I believe, and this is um, episode 1 for chapter 1 of Classroom Assessment for Student Success. And I am Caitlin Long, and I teach fifth year seminar at Caldwell Early College High School, but I'm a part of the MAT Secondary English program here at NCA&T.
Then I'm following next. So I'm Kawan. I am too following my teaching path of getting my license, which is in Family Consumer Science, also known as FCS for middle school age group. And then of course my concentration and focus as it pertains to the masters is the MAT with the concentration in Family Consumer Sciences.
My name is Jayana Humphrey. I am currently teaching in pre-K with Guilford County Schools, but my MAT licensure is in Family and Consumer Sciences, 7th through 12th grade.
My name is Aaliyah Miller. I am currently a family and consumer sciences teacher for middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And family consumer sciences is also the concentration area I'm in for the MAT program.
Perfect.
Perfect. So for the chapter 1 objectives, or as the chapter called it, learning targets, the first one was know how classroom assessment fits into the big picture of your job as a teacher. The second one was become familiar with the guiding principles for accuracy and effective use that underpin sound classroom assessment practice. And the third one was understand relationships among student motivation, success at learning, and assessment.
So I'll be reviewing over the first objective, which was know how classroom assessments fit into the big picture of your job as a teacher. And so to start it off, I wanted to give like a brief overview of what classroom assessment really is, which is classroom assessment is the gathering of evidence of student learning to inform instructional decisions. So I believe that classroom fits into the big picture of my job by it being data as it is often relied on heavily throughout the school year, especially for me as in pre-K since we don't really do standardized testing and all of that. We really rely on data collected at the end of the year to see how things move forward and how they'll transition into kindergarten. So assessment results can help decisions on things as simple as who a student works well with, or more serious things such as if they are on track to passing their class or the current grade level. So, oftentimes, I feel like the process of gathering data and evidence of student learning can be done well or poorly, but as we know, the overall goal is for it to be done well. The more well assessments go, the easier it is for us as teachers to make the best decisions regarding the students and for us. So in the text, it does mention that assessment processes and instruments have the opportunity to do far more than serve as the basis of graded and ranking students. They can accurately diagnose student needs, track and enhance student growth towards standards, motivate students to persist at learning, and teach them to self-assess and set goals for the next year. So I've picked that one as something important because I feel like it perfectly aligns with what assessment means as it pertains to a teacher because it's basically telling us that it is more than just testing your students and then giving them a bunch of tests to see how it's going. It's actually tracking them, seeing their progress, and seeing what else they can need. So again, I've said it relates to my current position in pre-K because in pre-K there's no standardized testing. Most of the time they're learning through play, and with that we're assessing and evaluating how they play with each other, how they do certain tasks, and if they're ready. And that concludes my reflection on objective 1. Know how classroom assessments fit into the big picture of your job as a teacher.
That's good. And I would chime in and add to that. Although they're at like a pivotal age where they're learning and adapting to like social awareness and the emotional beings and formulating and still formulating as they get older their personalities and who they're becoming and what that looks like and what friends they're making. I think this chapter aligns perfectly with that. Although they may not have, yeah, although they may not have like a direct test or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, but I think for behavioral purposes, um, I think it is good that y'all do like track data at that age to see like how they are progressing and what works, what doesn't work, how much time they need, how much time they don't need, different stuff like that. That's like really interacting with them.
Yeah, I think that's important. And on my end, I teach like 17, 18, 19-year-olds. So while I'm not giving them tests in my subject like traditionally, I do track a lot of data because they're taking college classes. So I track their college class data as well as like the MTSS data. And I'm on a student support team that's separate from MTSS. So we look at those documents to kind of help guide them for their college choices or career choices, or when we're placing them in college classes, like you said, of who they get along with and not. So like I have a whole document of like any student issues from their 5 years in high school, to make sure that we're not going to have an issue that we have to deal with later on. So I think that's important from, like you said, pre-K all the way up through like
Very.
adults. Yeah.
It's good. And then is this where how this chapter aligns with my beliefs about teaching and learning comes in?
I think we
Or
have
not yet?
objective 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry.
You're good. I'm not sure who was going to do that one. I think go ahead, go on. I think that you were going to do number 2, so I think that
Yeah.
kind of aligns with it. Sorry.
Okay, so in regarding to the objective number 2 and asking how this chapter aligns with my beliefs about teaching and learning, I believe that an assessment should support learning and not just measure it. I feel like just to harp a little bit with the middle school, that's kind of when you do start, aside from EOGs and like and stuff like that, and traditional regular inside classroom tests. With like elementary, when they get to middle school, like in 8th grade, like you start to be actually tested in science. Um, I think I think it's a good way to track and see what it is that they are retaining, what it is that they are not retaining, and then also using that data to going forward and also making projections based off of the data that is being received. Learning, of course, to me is ongoing, especially in middle school, teaching family consumer sciences where skills are built through practice. So I personally teach family consumer science with the breakdown of that 6th graders nutrition and wellness. So it's not just about eating or learning how to cook, but also building a healthy lifestyle with that and knowing how to adapt and build to that once you do leave out of middle school and then use real life applications while you are also at home. 7th grade is interior and interior design. Um, of course, in high school, which middle school is kind of looked over a little bit because you don't really get to do like the big projects as far as like making a full on garment, but you learn like the basics and the foundations. And then you have, they've changed this so many times. It was when I first came in, hospitality and finance. Then they switched and changed the curriculum to now just strictly personal finance, where you still really learn real life applications about banking, about your credit, about the process of buying a car. Because 9 times out of 10, most of them getting ready to go over to high school when I think you reach like 15 and a half now, you can start learning how to drive and stuff like that. You can also get a job if you want to under your state regulations and restrictions and what that looks like. But just again, teaching them real life applications that they can use not only within the classroom but outside of the classroom. Again, harping on hands-on activities such as labs, projects, and design work. Um, Across the board for me, labs look like, okay, with cooking, we have a cooking lab. Whatever that pertains to what I'm going to do at that time because there's no handbook on what you can and cannot cook, but teaching them how to look at ingredients and teaching them how to read food labels and nutritional facts and things like that. And then you have like your projects and design work. Design, I really give them just the foundational tools. That is something that I'm working on inside the classroom is building more projects around real life applications and that also interest them as well within its authentic forms of assessment and walking out what they actually look like. Having clear expectations helps students feel confident and successful. Meaningful feedback increases engagement and motivation. And not to harp on again what I personally do, but having that evaluation kind of helped me because 9 times out of 10, I'm looking to see like what is it that they're looking for. I don't even ask any questions. Nope, just come in, tell me what your feedback is. I'm gonna take that, and then we're gonna move forward and grow with that. Um, the chapter reinforced the importance of using assessments to guide instruction, not just to assign grades. I feel like a lot of times, especially with the kids, it's more so like, well, you're going to give me this. Are you going to grade the work or not? Or like, playing that tit for tat back and forth. And it's like, like whatever you do in here, or at least my room, is going to be graded. So if your parents look on Infinite Campus now, which it used to be Power School, and they see a list of like 45 things that we have done, I learned throughout the semester, you getting graded for that. Like I'm holding not only myself accountable, but also holding the students accountable as well. Um, it also challenged within the chapter for me to be more intentional with assessment data to support student growth. Again, when I first came in, pushing tests, collecting data, and stuff like that, as far as for CTE and family consumer science, was not necessarily pushed. You kind of make up your own of whatever that looks like for their retainment and for data purposes for yourself. So when somebody does say, well, what about this? Or did you try this? You can actually have data to pull from and also be intentional with it. Because I had my kids like one time working on a recent project where they were creating a mood board and I was in the middle of getting evaluated, and she had pointed out that she wanted them to more so do something group related versus individual, although I do all of that within my classroom, and not to negate the group work, but I kind of wanted to see like where they were at based off of what they learned at that time. Like, do you have the capability? Well, you have the capability to be creative, but do you have the capability to actually apply the concepts that you have learned within the classroom, just again in and outside of the classroom? Um, and lastly, also was an effect. It was effective in regarding to assessment builds confidence, skill development, and real world readiness. Um, and again, I feel like what we teach, even although we teach different curriculums within the group, I feel like we are trying to set them up for success, whether if you're teaching at the pre-K level, middle school level, elementary, high school level, even collegiate level. Um, there are different stages to it. Like middle school is supposed to prepare you for high school is supposed to prepare you for college, elementary is supposed to prepare you for your next steps and what that looks like. So start formulating, what you want to be, what you want to become, walking out what that looks like, having goals. That's another important thing, especially with my eighth graders. Like they don't, you know, they all they know is spending money. But okay, where does the money come from? What does a pay stub look like? What does a W-2 form look like? Why do we have to have taxes and different things like that? And then why are taxes different in a certain states versus our state? Just, giving them that and giving them the tools that they actually need. So I feel like the chapter was definitely spot on. Um, in relational to me personally. And then just hearing some of your feedback as well, I think is definitely applied in different areas and in different forms within our classrooms.
I feel that was good. And then to piggyback off of you, with what you said with assessments, setting them up for good success in the future as they progress throughout school. I also found that important because in the back of my head, I'm always thinking about, okay, so how's this going to go once you start moving forward. Like when you get to
Hmm.
kindergarten, how is you doing this going to
Hmm.
affect you? For like me, I have a kid in my class. They are nonverbal, but their parent pushes the general route instead of the special education route. So I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, you're pushing general, but if you look at it in the bigger picture, you know, we have all this assessment data saying we recommend this, but you're going this way. So eventually taking that assessment, getting that data, that's going to follow along with him. So like when they start to see where did it go wrong, they have that data to see, okay, this was happening and this was happening, but parents chose not to act on it. So I feel that's also very important because it covers you in any situation.
Hmm. Definitely a big lesson learned.
Hmm.
For sure. And just like our school is really big on documenting parent contacts and things like that. And so I think that's something that while I've made parent contacts my first year teaching, I didn't have a way, like, I didn't have a document, like, place to document it. And so I was like, I know I was making parent contacts, but then like the evidence of that wasn't there. So like I've like had to create a document so that I have that place to put each time I've documented like that they're failing or that they are not passing some of their college classes or that they haven't submitted any scholarships or whatever the case may be. So that is important so that they can kind of, it covers you as a teacher too.
Hmm.
Okay, so going into objective number 3, so it is student involvement, so which is the importance of welcoming students to be fully involved in classrooms. So as a FACS teacher, there's a lot of project-based learning, so that allows for a lot of student engagement, which is a great thing. So there are 4 main types of guiding principles, which is clear purpose, sound design, and effective communication. So, when assessing students, it's important to make the assessment purposes clear and have well defined learning targets. In the classroom example in the book given, Miss Weathersby aligned her writing rubrics with district writing standards. So, Miss Weathersby's students were engaged in giving and receiving feedback with each other. So, in the end, her students assess their weaknesses and strengths to track their own improvement. Overall, Miss Weathersby's class demonstrated 5 main guiding principles, which is clear purpose, clear targets, sound design, effective communication, and a lot of student involvement. So that ends objective 3, and I'm going to turn it over to objective number 4.
And I don't think there was a fourth objective for this chapter. Um, but does someone want to do what was most convincing or useful to them?
Okay, that's me.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the ideas that I found most useful in this chapter is involving students in the assessment process. So, this is very useful because students are able to grow themselves and develop their own learning capabilities. Students enjoy working with each other, so you are able to incorporate that into the process. Another idea I found most useful is selecting and building high quality assessments. So, when ensuring that your assessments are high quality, you are able to measure student growth more accurately. So, this idea is useful because when it is implemented, it can challenge students to think more critically and encourage them to utilize deeper thinking learning skills. And the final idea I found most useful was communicating assessment results to students in a timely fashion. So this idea is useful because not only students but teachers can also forget content or information pretty quickly. So the quicker the assessments can be reviewed, the better it is to be stored in your mind. So making the results understandable for students is also important because student comprehension levels are varied. So using a fairly simple yet effective assessment rubric can be beneficial for all learners and different academic levels. So that ends this question. I'm going to turn it over to the next question.
Okay. So the next question was, let me make sure I get this right. So what strategy or idea from this chapter would you feel most confident implementing and why? So the idea that I selected was the idea of student involvement. I feel like as a teacher, having very engaging conversations and engaging learning in your classroom is very important. I feel like student teacher relationships matter, class participation matters, and I feel it sets the pace for how the class is going to go and how the year is going to go. If there's no sense of student involvement, it's going to feel more like a lecture to them, and a lot of times lecture allows students to really tune you out or feel uninterested. I know, like speaking for me, like a lot of times with my pre-Ks, like if there's not something engaging that they can do, they'll walk around saying they're bored or they'll start to fall asleep. And so for me, I understand that importance even with 4 and 5 year olds. And student involvement is something I already do. And I have to make sure that I maintain student involvement in my classroom because they're young, their attention span isn't there. And even as you get older now, it seems like a lot of kids just don't have that attention span anymore that they used to in the past. So like a 5 minute or 30 minute lesson can quickly bore them out if there's nothing. Like putting a piece of paper in front of them and saying, do this, there's no involvement. So a lot of times they're not going to be engaged or they're not going to give their all because they're going to be over it and ready for it to be done. And I feel like the text did provide quite a few tips that could help me, even as a teacher, improve and continue to strengthen the student involvement in my classroom.
Yeah, I think that's great and important. And I have to remind myself of that since my class is hyper individualized because I'm doing like college applications, scholarships, things like that. And so sometimes I'm in those moments, there's people working independently and they need time to work on those things. But I think in the spring, when I get to do some more creative projects, like a cooking project for dorms and like things like that, roommate conflict scenarios, they really enjoy that more because they're up doing something with their peers. So I think that's important.
I think that was good. I would say coming from me,
Mhm.
and it's so funny that we're talking about like relationship building and student engagement and stuff like that. It's also important to also engage the parents as well.
Mhm.
I haven't been teaching that long, but I feel like there's like a gap. And when I went into it, of course, I was told at first, like take everything that you already know and that you was taught out of it, right? Because this is a new generation of kids. This is a whole
Mm.
new wave of kids based on how we grew up and what was learned and what was taught and how we built relationships and went about different things. It's just so imperative to do make sure that you build those relationships not only with the student but with the parents too. Because I feel like if the parents are involved, the students are more involved in most cases, not all, but most cases, because I feel like I don't know, this generation today kind of lacks that. And it's just kind of more so like, you get dressed, hopefully you take a shower and things like that, and then we just send you on your way. There's no checking, there's no solidifying anything. It's just it is what it is, and that's that. And I kind of have to remind them, like, no, like, the more you are involved, the better. Even if it's down to like the small stuff, like checking grades. We all know kids are slick these days, deleting numbers or uh not showing them, for example, a piece of data like your progress report or your report card. I feel like when we were in school, like you were made to get those signed, bring them back and literally get a grade and then maybe have like a separate conversation on how you can do better and how you can grow. Like I have these, I call them weekly family huddles on Fridays where I do talk about your grade. I do talk about what I see you're doing and what you're not doing opposed to what you have the capability to do. And just making sure that you are succeeding and making sure that you are thriving. Um, in the areas where you're kind of picked out to not thrive when we know you actually can thrive in those areas. But no, that was really good.
And then I had the part of what makes you feel uncertain, nervous, or hesitant about applying in practice. And for me personally, because my class is different and I don't have like structured assessments, like tests or quizzes that I give, I still want to make sure that I am assessing them and giving them feedback so that they know that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So making sure that even though I don't have assessments in a traditional sense, that I am still giving them clear learning targets with a purpose for them and communicating those things to them and their parents is super important. And because it's all about them and what they're doing for their future, whether they're doing military, whether they're going to a 2-year or 4-year school or job, I individualize the lesson for them. So they are involved in at least the process, but keeping them involved in the assessment is important too. And so it made me nervous reading this because I was like, oh gosh, like I'm not doing these things. I should be doing these things. But I think after like reading more and talking with you all today, like I do think that I am assessing them. It just doesn't look, it's not an EOC or a final exam. So I think that's important. And then I think we have about a minute left before Zoom's going to cut us off.
Mhm.
So I'll just conclude really quickly. So it was really talking about how assessment is important as a teacher and part of your job, how we need to make sure we're accurate and effectively using assessment in the day-to-day class, not just as a final exam or things like that, and that getting students involved in the assessment process is really key to their learning and making sure that they're not just doing it for a grade, but actually doing it for knowledge. So anyway, well,
I think
thank
that
y'all.
was